Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello, and we're back for part 2 of episode 2 of Rabbits, Concernicus Jones. We're going to pick up basically where we left off last time and plunge forward.
Our family had always been what you'd call lower middle class, and we were always at least 4 or 5 years behind the rest of the kids in our neighborhood. By the time I was playing Yoshi's Island on the Nintendo, the Game Boy Color had already come out. I wouldn't get up to date when it came to video games until I bought the PlayStation 2 when it came out, just around Halloween in the year 2000. Shortly before she disappeared, Yumiko had asked to speak with me about ColecoVision's Donkey Kong, one of our favorite console games from back then.
Now, Donkey Kong was a game I grew up on. It's one of the games I grew up on. Pac-Man, Defender, all the sequels and stuff to all those particular games. And I love the way the writers incorporate a very Gen X feel to their story. This whole story, both seasons and the mini show, do a wonderful job on. It has a very Gen X feel. It's just it is. It's very. I've got to figure this out on my own. You know, the whole latchkey kid thing. It's there. It's just, as a Gen Xer, it's just one of those things that I really enjoy, that I like in my storytelling, especially now that I'm older and it revisits my teenage years and my young adult years. It's always just really cool that way.
Her thesis being, Donkey Kong was the first home console game that actually delivered an experience comparable to that of a stand-up cabinet arcade game. She was writing an article for Wired, tracking certain aspects of console versus arcade.
Computer.
With the culture poised to move into virtual and augmented reality in a big way.
Maybe I should expound upon that. When I play video games, I play them on a computer, a desktop computer. I've never been able to get into like the consoles or like the games on your phones and stuff like that. Just not something I've gotten into, but that just, I am a computer, when it comes to gaming, I am a desktop computer snob, I guess you would say.
Yumiko was interested in how the past might inform the very near future. Aside from a few years after college, Yumiko and I did our best to make sure we lived as close to each other as possible. I could walk to her place in 15 minutes. Normally, we spent a great deal of time together, but we'd kept missing each other lately. I was working when Yumiko was available, and vice versa. I always walk by Miko's place on my way home from work. One night, after I'd spent all day working on the relaunch of the all-new Public Radio Alliance, which, at that moment, meant painting the studio and recovering some old...
See, that's another thing. I love how they work into it. They use, first of all, they use their real names. Nick Silver's a real person. Terry Miles is a real person. And as far as my research has dug up for me, that Carly Parker is actually a real person. They use their real names. And they weave that fabric of reality with fantasy, with the sci-fi elements. It's well done. I really enjoy the way they've done it and how they've done it.
chairs, I walked by and saw her through the window. Yumiko lives in a large street-level apartment in a classic 4-floor red brick building in a friendly, older neighborhood of Seattle. It's almost exactly halfway between the PRA studio and my apartment. People would congregate outside Yumiko's building in the warmer months. Musicians, playwrights, novelists, and actors. We spent more than a few late nights drinking wine and talking about everything from our love of Amy Hempel to streak-free mascara to how we wish we had the fortitude to read Proust or Pynchon.
See, that's another thing I've noticed is somebody on the writing team or who goes through, does the edits, rewrites, and stuff like that is a connoisseur of wine. Because drinking wine and beer, I think, are about the hardest alcohol references that there are. I think there might be one or two for like whiskey or bourbon and stuff, but for the most part, it's usually, as far as the alcohol goes, it's the whole just wine and beer, kind of teetotaler type stuff.
It was the beating, creative heart of the neighborhood. All were welcome. I was walking home from work and saw Yumiko. Her blinds were up, and her living room was clearly visible from the sidewalk. She was facing away from the window, sitting at her desk watching something on her computer. I knocked and knocked, but I couldn't get her to turn and look. She had to hear me. I rang her extremely loud and irritating doorbell, which I knew she hated.
So that's another thing I like about this. They do really well. As she was talking about going and being able to walk to her friend's house, and while she's describing this, you hear the footsteps in the background. She says she rang the doorbell, and you hear the doorbell sound effect. That kind of reminds me of the old radio dramas from back before television, like The Phantom, Gunsmoke before it became TV, and many other shows that eventually transitioned from radio to TV. But the way they do the sound effects in this, the background noises, they just kind of add to the immersion. It's not like you're getting just straight, reading of a script. You get all this extra in there that just adds to the immersion.
After a few minutes of non-stop ringing and banging, she slowly stood up and answered the door. She wasn't herself at all. She appeared completely dazed and confused. I told her that I'd been knocking for a long time. She said she didn't hear any knocking, only the doorbell. I made us tea. It took her a few minutes to shake it off, but she eventually seemed to come back down to earth. I asked her what she was doing that was so important. She told me that she'd been watching a video. It was something she'd discovered while digging into an old computer game from the early 80s, an Apple II game called Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord. Yumiko told me she'd discovered something in the code of wizardry while following a lead on some kid's suicide. Something that led her to an old website, the kind of site where there was nothing left, aside from a few broken image links. Basically a Wayback Machine relic of the Netscape or Mosaic era.
I remember Netscape and Mosaic. They were both really... There were two browsers I used a lot back in the 90s. In fact, I still occasionally refer to Firefox as Netscape, because it was Firefox is what I started using as Netscape started to die out.
But a link on that site led her to an outdated, obviously obsolete personality test of some kind. She told me that the questions felt to her like what she imagines Scientology might be like, although she had no basis of comparison. Just a feeling. There were only 5 questions, so she answered them and pressed submit. She told me she must have done something right, because that quiz or test unlocked a link to a torrent file, which resulted in her downloading the video she'd been watching. I asked her what the video was about, but she couldn't really answer. She said it was supposed to have a clue, something that would open the next door, or portal, what the players called rabbit holes. I thought all of this was a little strange, of course, but Yumiko did have her quirks. A lot of them. She was extremely well-educated and smart, but she went through an astrology phase, a pyramid scheme thing about sound healing, and more than a few other strange scenarios.
Which that, I can honestly say, is also a cool reference, because I remember in the 90s and early 2000s, all the late night infomercials. At the time I was working night shift, and on my days off you get all those infomercials for those schemes and sound healing and magnet bracelets and all that kind of stuff. That's just kind of cool that stuff like that is put in there, that how they weave it in, how they make it work with the story. Losing my headphones.
I would have forgotten all about the video thing if it hadn't happened again, 2 nights later.
Hey everyone, my name is Terry Miles, and as most of you probably know, I'm the founder of the Public Radio Alliance and cousin to Nick Silver. A lot of people think Nick and I sound alike, but neither one of us.
The in-episode plug for stuff that their merchandise, their book. It's mainly the book of Rabbits by Terry Miles, and it is worth checking out. I picked it up. It's really good. So we'll turn the volume back up on the desktop. We should be getting back to the story pretty soon, within the next couple seconds or so.
Thank you so much for all of the support over the years. It means a lot. Actually, it means everything. Check the Rabbits podcast feed for a 3-episode miniseries called The Path, A Rabbit Story. And remember, if you're interested in the Rabbits novel, you can find it anywhere books are sold or visit terrymiles.com for more information.
Like I said, that is, even though I'm making comment on an ad, it is a good book, and it lives up to everything that they say it is. So, if you're interested in this podcast, and if you're interested in a very Gen X story that has a lot of the themes and everything that goes on with this story. I know we're only like 2 episodes in, but if you listen to more and more of the story, the book is almost a must-have. If you enjoy Season 1, The Path of the Rabbit, and Season 2, this book is almost a must-read.
Yumiko was supposed to meet me at the studio. We were going to have dinner together to celebrate my promotion. I'd just been made a capital P producer at the all-new Public Radio Alliance, which was both exciting and terrifying. When Miko didn't show up, I called, texted and emailed, but there was no response. I called Harper and a few other friends, but nobody had seen her. Worried, I stopped by her place on my way home, only to find her in the same position she'd been in 2 nights ago, sitting in a chair, staring at her laptop. I knocked, just like before, and just like before, Yumiko didn't respond. She just kept watching, staring. I tried to make out what she was watching, but her body was blocking the screen. This time, even after ringing the bell, she wouldn't answer. I knocked and rang and knocked and banged, but nothing. She just kept staring at the screen. I was getting really worried at this point, and I rang the super. She finally opened Yumiko's door after knocking for a full minute. I rushed into the living room.
This is where we start the kind of the supernatural aspect of the story. The supernatural kind of just pops in and out and works really well.
And found her sitting there, watching the same video. Her apartment smelled terrible. She smelled terrible. I thanked the super and told her I'd let her know if anything was wrong. I shut Yumiko's laptop and she looked up at me, dazed again. She asked what I was doing there. I told her we had a date. She thought it was tomorrow. I told her it was tomorrow. That's when I noticed that Yumiko had peed herself. And it looked like she'd done it more than once. She slowly tried to get up, but she had a really hard time moving her legs or arms at first.
And now you know one of the reasons why I have the content warning at the beginning of each of these videos.
I suddenly realized she'd been sitting in front of that screen for at least 24 hours, possibly longer. There was something seriously wrong with Yumiko. After I helped her into the shower and made her eat some soup and half a sandwich, I asked her about the video. What was it? Why was she watching it for so long? She didn't remember the video being long at all. Just a few minutes, she said. I tried to explain that she'd been sitting in front of her computer for more than a day, that she'd peed herself, but it didn't seem to register as strange or important to her. She wasn't all there. I decided Yumiko needed some kind of intervention, and she needed it now. I called Yumiko's brother, Adam, and he suggested that the two of us should speak with Miko before we called her parents. I agreed and set up our intervention under the guise of a dinner. The three of us used to eat together all the time, so there was no reason she would suspect anything. Yumiko, however, never made it to that dinner.
And that, I think, is a good place to call this video good. Like I've said in previous videos before, I'm just sharing my enjoyment of this. This channel is not monetized. These videos are not monetized. I am doing this out of just enjoyment of the Rabbits podcast. You can lost my place now. You can subscribe if you want to, hit the bell thing, give a like, all that good stuff. If you want, if you don't. This not being monetized, all subscribing and liking and all that does is put it out on the algorithm and trains the algorithm to shoot it out to more people. And that's up to you if you want to. If you don't. This is a free country and it's not a big deal. Also, the outros, once we get probably episode 4 or 5, on the outros, I'm gonna probably go back and cover more of what we listened to up to that point and start, expounding on my ideas of how and what and why the things are getting done the way they are. The conclusions I came to and things that intrigued me. So, but right now we're fairly early in the series, so I'm kind of doing these meandering walkabout type outros. So, until next time, peace.